There is a phase in every great collapse when nothing appears broken. Command structures still function. Orders are still issued. Symbols of power remain intact. To those inside the system, strength feels permanent, almost natural. Past success creates the illusion that survival is guaranteed. This is the most dangerous moment in any decline, because it removes urgency. When confidence hardens into certainty, systems stop asking whether they can still sustain what they are doing. German air power entered this phase long before it visibly collapsed. The Luftwaffe continued to fight, continued to score victories, and continued to project an image of competence. Pilots were experienced, aircraft were advanced, doctrine was respected. From the outside, it looked like resistance. From the inside, it felt like endurance. But endurance is not power. Power is the ability to replace losses, to regenerate skill, and to sustain pressure over time. Those foundations were already eroding. What makes this story uncomfortable is that collapse did not arrive as a dramatic failure. It arrived as miscalculation. German leadership misunderstood what kind of war they were fighting and what kind of power it required. They believed confidence, skill, and tradition could compensate for shrinking capacity. They were wrong. This is not a story about aircraft or dogfights. It is a story about how systems collapse quietly, and why recognition almost always comes too late. This channel is dedicated to examining history without nostalgia and without spectacle, not to celebrate victories or assign moral judgment, but to understand how power actually works and why it fails. If this kind of analysis resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. History is carried by people, families, and places. Remember what institutions often refuse to explain. Today's video examines the collapse of German air power during the Second World War, not as a battlefield story, but as a systemic one. The Luftwaffe did not fail because its pilots lacked courage or intelligence. It failed because confidence replaced capacity, and belief replaced logistics. By the time that reality became undeniable, the system no longer had the ability to correct itself. What follows is not a dramatic rise and fall narrative. It is a slow, structural unraveling, one that offers lessons far beyond aviation or war. This channel is dedicated to examining history without nostalgia and without spectacle, not to celebrate victories or assign moral judgment, but to understand how power actually works and why it fails. If this kind of analysis resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. History is carried by people, families, and places. Remember what institutions often refuse to explain. Today's video examines the collapse of German air power during the Second World War, not as a battlefield story, but as a systemic one. The Luftwaffe did not fail because its pilots lacked courage or intelligence. It failed because confidence replaced capacity, and belief replaced logistics. By the time that reality became undeniable, the system no longer had the ability to correct itself. What follows is not a dramatic rise and fall narrative. It is a slow, structural unraveling, one that offers lessons far beyond aviation or war. Training is where power is manufactured. It is slow, invisible, and easily sacrificed under pressure. The Luftwaffe's collapse accelerated when training became a casualty of necessity rather than strategy. Early war German pilot training was extensive. Cadets logged hundreds of hours. They trained in navigation, formation flying, gunnery, and emergency procedures. This investment produced confident, capable pilots. As the war intensified, training collided with material reality. Fuel shortages restricted flight hours. Allied bombing disrupted production and transport. Aviation gasoline became scarce. Training units were grounded or reduced to theoretical instruction. Pilots learned procedures without practicing them. Skills became conceptual rather than embodied. Instructor losses compounded the damage. Veteran pilots were pulled from training to fill combat units. Many were killed. Each death removed a multiplier of knowledge. By 1944, some German pilots entered combat with fewer than 100 flight hours. Many had never fired their weapons in aerial combat conditions. They faced enemies trained longer and more systematically. Operational units now flew with inexperienced wingmen. Formation discipline collapsed. Tactical cohesion eroded. Veterans fought while compensating for novices. Fuel shortages affected combat readiness as well. Aircraft sat idle. Emergency procedures went unpracticed. Mistakes became fatal. Meanwhile, American training expanded. Fuel was abundant. Aircraft were plentiful. Instructors remained instructors. Training was protected as a strategic asset. One system consumed its future to survive the present. The other preserved its future while fighting. Once training collapsed, defeat became inevitable. German air doctrine emphasized initiative and individual judgment. Pilots were encouraged to adapt, exploit, and improvise. This produced tactical brilliance in isolated engagements. But tactics operate in moments. Power operates across time. The Luftwaffe mistook continued tactical competence for systemic health. Victories were counted. Enemy aircraft destroyed were reported. What went unmeasured was sustainability. Pilot fatigue, replacement rates, training loss. Losses were rationalized as acceptable. Each engagement carried a symmetric cost. Germany lost irreplaceable experience. The Allies lost replaceable material. Leadership responded by increasing operational tempo. Veterans were pushed harder. Aircraft were committed aggressively. This created the appearance of resistance while accelerating exhaustion. The system entered a feedback loop. Tactical pressure increased to compensate for strategic weakness. That pressure burned remaining capacity faster. Allied doctrine prioritized survival and consistency. Predictable formations, mutual support, loss minimization. German pilots often fought brilliantly and died. Allied pilots often fought conservatively and returned. Over time, survival mattered more than skill. Learning mattered more than brilliance. By the time German command recognized the imbalance, there was no margin left. Tactical excellence cannot rescue strategic insolvency. German air power was shaped by a belief in elegance, efficiency, and mastery. Aircraft were expected to be refined, pilots elite. War was seen as a contest of skill. American air power followed a different philosophy: redundancy, durability, and survivability. German leadership dismissed this as inefficiency. This ideological lens distorted perception. American resilience was misread as luck. Numbers were dismissed as compensation for inferiority. Material reality contradicted this belief. Survivable aircraft created surviving pilots. Surviving pilots accumulated experience. Experience reinforced structure. German designs optimized performance over endurance. Training optimized precision over resilience. As pressure increased, ideology prevented adaptation. Acknowledging superiority would have required abandoning identity. That admission never came in time. Belief hardened. Reality advanced. No doctrine can replace fuel. No ideology can train pilots without aircraft. Material reality always wins. Collapse arrives when an equation stops balancing. For the Luftwaffe, losses exceeded replacements. Training vanished. Fuel disappeared. Production lagged. Effort continued, but agency vanished. Pilots flew knowing the outcome was fixed. This is decline's final phase. Activity without effect. American air power operated freely. Losses were absorbed. Mistakes corrected. Capacity regenerated. German command recognized the problem without solutions. Even perfect decisions could not reverse insolvency. By 1945, courage remained. Effectiveness did not. The system had consumed its future to preserve its past. Defeat was no longer preventable, only survivable. Power ends when regeneration ends. Everything after is noise. The collapse of German air power was not sudden or mysterious. It followed a pattern that repeats whenever confidence replaces capacity and belief replaces structure. The Luftwaffe did not lose because its pilots were inferior. It lost because it misunderstood how modern power is sustained. This lesson extends beyond war. Institutions fail the same way. Nations decline the same way. When systems stop measuring what keeps them functional, training, replacement, logistics, resilience, success becomes memory, and collapse becomes invisible. The most dangerous moment is not weakness, but misplaced confidence. By the time reality forces recognition, correction is no longer possible. History does not punish arrogance emotionally. It punishes miscalculation structurally. And once capacity is gone, confidence no longer matters.